Well, Pam, which way you going? Left or right?
Right.
That's too bad.
Why?
Well, because it was a 50-50 shot on whether you'd be going left or right. You see, we're both going left. You could have just as easily been going left, too, and if that was the case, it would have been a while before you started getting scared. But since you're going the other way, I'm afraid you're gonna have to start getting scared immediately.
There's no more room in hell. The dead will walk here.
I just can't take no pleasure in killing that. Just some things you gotta do. Death has come to your little town, Sheriff.
You gotta be fucking kidding.
Who's laughing now? Be one of us. Join us! Join us! Join us! Join us! Wait here for a little while. See what happens.
Good evening, campers, dreamers, and babysitters, and welcome to another edition of SplatterCast. I'm Dylan Newell.
And I'm Luke Janesco.
And yes, so we're coming up on, God, what episode is this now?
Oh boy, you threw this to me. Is this?
This
Yeah,
is gotta
good
be
question.
something. I can find
9
out.
or 10?
Yeah, between this and Sunday Scaries, I know we're at like episode 15 on the Sunday Scaries coming
Yeah,
up here.
that one escalated very quickly.
I mean, when it's
I didn't realize we were that high up until I was like, oh, uploading it to YouTube. I'm like, really? We're up there that high already?
Yeah, we are on episode 10. Yes,
Oh,
that's
there
what I
we go.
thought. Okay, I didn't want to say officially because obviously we should have probably done our due diligence here. But if you watched last week's episode and you've been keeping up with this, you can hear that the mic situation has been resolved. That was my bad, guys. Sorry for the dog soldiers one. But episode 10, baby. So we've made it to 10 episodes here, and that feels pretty good, man. I mean, this is great. Like we didn't make it to 10 episodes of the first run around on this. What do we do? Like 4?
Yeah, I think. No, I think maybe we got to 5 or 6.
5 or 6? Okay, maybe.
I
don't
thought
know.
so. We ended with what's it called? Why am I forgetting? Slither. And,
Slither was the
then we
last
called it
one.
quits. I think we had another one. Yeah, we were set to record another one, and we never got there. I can't remember what it was going to be, but never actually happened. But going back to that audio, I was going to record actually through my webcam this week.
Oh,
That would be
okay.
very, very interesting.
That would be funny. Yeah, we do have the same webcam, so you could literally do the same thing if need be. At least we know that if anything were to ever happen to our mics mid-show, that picks up at least. So, I mean,
And
I
then
guess that's not the worst thing in the world.
Yeah, at least I remember when we did by admission only. Do you remember when we did? I think it was the first or second podcast. It was definitely when we were doing the Marvel films, because I think that's what we started off with, where you recorded an entire episode with your mic off.
Oh my God.
And then I texted you and was like, hey, guess what?
Yeah, and those were like hour 45 episodes too. Like they
Yes,
were
'cause we were
long.
going through everything. Gosh, that was a
Dude.
nightmare.
That was awful. Like seriously, I so much more appreciate this format of just like taking one at a time and just doing a little deep dive into it. Because that was a lot. Like that was a lot of research. That was a lot of and it's like we never even got into really anything behind the scenes other than stuff off the top of our heads. It was more just like, oh, we're just like kind of talking about it, and then like we're going to talk about our thoughts on this movie, then we're going to talk about this other movie and this other movie, and it would just like stack on top of each other. Really, in our infancy, we were making all the mistakes that newcomers make all the time.
Yeah, I just remember sitting there watching all those Marvel films from Phase 1 and then being like, I got to remember all this stuff to try and record a giant episode of something. And man, what What an awful time. I mean, was it fun? Sure, because it got us to
Absolutely.
this point, but boy, those were some rookie mistakes on our end.
That was the testing ground, you know what I mean? We had to figure out if this was where it was. That's where we developed our chemistry, if you would say,
Exactly.
you know what I mean? Like this is where we kind of got the banter going and we learned that this is what we want to do. Okay, this is how we want to do it.
That's where we became so conversational because believe it or not, we were worse at talking to each other than we are right now.
Yeah, we didn't talk to each other in person. Like at work, it would be like, "Oh, hey, how's it going? Oh, hey, and we just talk over each other, and then like both turn around and just stay in
Yep.
complete silence. Like it was
And that's
really
how it
awkward,
was. Hands in our
awful,
pockets, looking at the floor.
awful when we worked together. Like we never helped any customers because if we even mentioned or even looked at each other, it would be fucking rough. Um,
Look
yeah,
how far we've come.
I
Now we're
know.
recording podcasts with our mics off, so just work.
um, I do want to say a little update. If you guys take a look at the bottom of the screen there, we do have a little Instagram symbol there now. And what does that mean? Well, that just means that I opened the SplatterCast Pod Instagram. Same as Twitter. You can find us under there. I'll probably try to keep that handle pretty consistent if I can. I don't imagine anybody else would have that. I hope not. Um, uh, through other social medias as we go along here. So that way we can just keep it real simple, real easy for you guys. Just so that way when you go to look for us, you can always just type in Splattercast Pod and it should come right up. But we do have an Instagram. Only got about 4 posts up right now, just kind of trying to figure out exactly what we want to do with it.
It's in
I
its
know,
infancy at the moment.
yeah. Have you haven't even signed into it yet, have you?
No, I've looked at it, but I've never actually signed in. I think I'm gonna kind of commit to it here in the next few days and see what kind of content I put up
Yeah,
on the old gram, as they call it, the old
yeah,
Insta. I don't know what they call it, to be
I don't know
honest
what the
with
kids call it these days now. But yeah, I know a lot of the kids are going towards TikTok, which we have one of those, but haven't done anything with that yet. So we'll get that going here sooner rather than later. Just a lot to keep up on, especially just for 2 people. So we're pretty consistent with Twitter. We do our best on there to keep up with the conversation. I know Luke's kind of the mastermind on that one. He always seems to get the likes and the conversation going on there. I
I find
usually use
being
that
as
for posting
abrasive as
updates.
possible is really how you survive Twitter.
But Instagram should be some fun. I think that with that being more of a friendlier thing for long-winded posts, I might try to stick to that on my side a little bit more, just because I tend to type a lot when I write things up, just because I can't shut up. So that's
Less
that's
is
for
more
me.
does not is not a thought in Dylan's head when he's posting.
Never, never. And unfortunately, Twitter limits your character count. So had to get creative, had to get better because it's always a pain whenever you have like a nice little setup for something. And then you're like, okay, I want to tag horror community and horror fam and all these other things just so that way it blasts out there and more people get it. And then you just see like you type in horror community, it's like, oh, -2 characters. And I'm like, fuck. Like,
It's
what do
like,
I
hold
do
on,
now?
how do I rephrase everything I just said into a
Yep.
shorter length?
Yeah, it's always a good time, always. But this week is Luke's pick. So, Luke, do you want to introduce us here onto what you decided for the follow up to the Dog Soldiers episode? What is episode number 10 of Splattercast?
Well, the first thought in my head was, what can really follow Werewolf Soldiers? And there's only one actual pick. There's only one horror figure that could do that, and that is a demented, uh, possessed doll. Yes, we are talking here on Splattercast, Child's Play 2. I
Yes.
figured, in this one, I decided to kind of go Child's Play 2, because this one holds a special place in my heart. I love the first one, but honestly, Child's Play 2 is actually like this is my definitive Child's Play. This is when Jason gets his mask for me. This is really when they hit their stride. So I have a huge love for Child's Play 2. I think this is really where they're firing on all cylinders for this kind of concept.
Yeah. So, it's no secret if you've kept up with us on, I think, primarily Sunday Scaries, probably mentioned it a couple times on this show also. that I'm not really well versed in the Child's Play franchise.
Not at all.
By this point I had seen the first one and I had seen the remake. But I hadn't seen anything else other than like maybe bits and pieces on TV here and there. And it really wasn't until we started getting into this one after I watched this and then rewatched part of the original that I kind of think I didn't even really get the full experience of the original, because like I was telling you before we started, I'm pretty sure I watched that one on TV
Yeah.
because there was a lot of stuff I didn't remember. Granted, it's been years. Like I'd probably watched that when I was maybe 14, 15 years old. So, but there was still a lot of stuff that just like I guess I just didn't appreciate at the time. I still remember the story and basically how it goes, and it was never a thing where I was just like, oh, I don't like it or anything. Like I really enjoyed Child's Play 1 from what I remembered, but it just, I guess maybe I just didn't have access to the other movies as easily. And when I did, it was kind of just one of those things where it was like kind of lower on the list for me.
Yeah.
And then I just kind of got into my niches and my niche with just like, Friday the 13th and Halloween and Nightmare on Elm Street. I kind of kept going through the Mount Rushmore again and again and again. And then before I even went down that rabbit hole with this kind of a slasher, I would start looking into things like cosmic horror, me and my creatures features, it's just all that stuff where I'm just like, I just kind of glazed over it, I guess, after, all these years. And this has been really my first sticking point or inkling back into the Child's Play franchise in probably about 10 years. So pretty interesting shit.
And getting into this, because I know like you said, you haven't really seen a lot of Child's Play things. And I want to get your take on this, because looking at like the Mount Rushmore, where we have, your Freddys, your Jasons, all these kind of huge kind of characters, I guess, in a sense, in a literal sense, where these are like grown human beings. Do you find it harder to take this kind of Child's Play concept seriously, in the sense where, oh, it's a doll, how creative can you get in terms of kills, and taking that as a threat? Because I know that is a struggle for some people to say, even people who love horror, to say, I mean, Child's Play really isn't kind of my kind of horror, where it's hard to sell that that, I don't know, what is he, 1 foot 1.5 feet, you know what I mean, doll as this kind of threat that's gonna slash you, so was that a hard thing for you to get behind, in terms of kind of finding the time to deep dive into this franchise?
It could have been. It definitely, I think, probably played a factor back in the day of me just kind of being like, well, and you got to remember, like, where I come from, like the bits and pieces I did see were a lot of these later movies. And the reputation that it had at that point for me was a lot of that Seed of Chucky, Bride of Chucky, kind of like when they decided, we're gonna go for more of the comedy angle with it. From what I understand, I haven't seen those movies, but I've seen bits and pieces online, trailers, merchandise. I remember Hot Topic back in the day had a lot of that Bride of Chucky, Seed of Chucky stuff
Yeah.
all over it. So it's like, that's more the Chucky that I grew up kind of understanding. And it just kind of, I guess, was more of a turn off to me because, I know Freddy's notoriously, has his one-liners and his jokes and stuff, but like by that point I had already been exposed to the first Nightmare on Elm Street. So it's kind of like I can see the threat there. And I mean, like you said, just like looking at him, he's a pretty creepy guy. So it's one of those things where it's like it's an easier sell. So yeah, I think maybe it's just kind of poor circumstance of just my age group and where I grew up and the time I grew up in and where the franchise was to kind of give me that kind of stigma a little bit. Because I go back and like I was telling you, I watched this and I was really impressed with it. Like we'll get into it a little deeper here in a little bit, but like it was one of those things where I'm just like, this is way darker in tone than I was expecting, but still has some of that humor. I actually think that I kind of got to really, like, as you stated, this is the film that gave, like Jason his hockey mask. This is what really cements Chucky for you. And I kind of feel that because like the first film is a great setup. But this, I think like he was firing on all cylinders and I kind of get the full picture now.
Yeah.
So yeah, I would say that it's just poor circumstance for me of why he never really made it in my Mount Rushmore.
Yeah, and this is where it's like I think this is where the character hits its stride. Um, this is definitive Chucky for me, and I always forget that we kind of grew up in slightly different time periods where you grew up totally bypassing probably that original trilogy because it was late '80s, early '90s thing. So by the time you were growing up and seeing Chucky, it was more so the comedy aspect of things. Where I have a respect for Bride of Chucky. Obviously, I think they did something very unique and new. They're kind of switching the genre completely and kind of taking the franchise in a different direction and introducing a new character that is really connected with audiences, which you don't really see in the fourth installment of any franchise. But those first three films are very different in tone. I mean, you can kind of see where Bride of Chucky where they end up with it because especially in this film you really see a lot of different one-liners and things like that with Chucky. He's very charismatic. He's different than, I mean, he's on par with a Freddy Krueger, where we can deliver one-liners and have some fun, but we're also really slashing people and killing everyone and being that kind of that slasher threat. So like going into this one where you hadn't really seen too much of anything in terms of Child's Play properties. I'm just curious because I picked Spawn and that was kind of for different reasons where it was like um there is potential there. Do I think it's a great movie? No, but there's something there as a talking point. Did you have any hesitation kind of as soon as I said Child's Play 2 to be like, I don't know if I really want to watch this? Were you dragging your feet at all going into it, or you're like, let's see what we have?
No, I would say I was dragging my feet a lot harder with Spawn,
Yeah,
just because of the
rightfully so.
reputation of the film. But this one, no, I was more excited, because it's like you had been threatening's the wrong word, but you'd been touting since we really got this show back up and running back in March about how like you were, or was it May, one of the two, but like
May, I
whenever we
think.
got this thing started in like May, you were saying how like we're going to do a dive into Chucky, especially because of the series and everything, and how well that's been received recently and kind of how that's carrying on the franchise in a better light. It's one of those things where it's like I totally was on board with this because it was a blind spot. Admittedly, it's a blind spot, and like a little tease, but the next Splattercast is already mapped out. So like
Yeah.
I already have it figured out what we're talking about for my next pick, and that's a blind spot for me as well. So it's like we're kind of going to be able to kind of meld these two franchises almost together in a sense in this conversation, which is pretty fitting, I would say, kind of leading into you know, uh Halloween per se, as that's going to be
Yeah.
coming up at the end of the month after the next show. So, it's just something where it's like I know this is something that I need to really give more attention to and really take that deep dive on. Like I can put Friday the 13th on the back burner. I can put Halloween on the back burner for a couple of weeks and I can watch, the Child's Play movies and, a few other things and just really give my attention to it. So I was excited when you said, we're going to do this one because it was definitely something where it's like, could I have taken the initiative and watched them all right when you had said that? Sure. But I knew that you were going to pick this at some point. So I figured I'll just wait and I'll take them piece by piece here. And I feel good about doing it because I definitely really enjoyed my experience with this movie. And I think that this is a really nice reintroduction to the character for me. It gives me a lot of hope. It makes me eager to purchase the NECA, I must say, because if you notice, I have a lot of representation back there. I don't have a Chucky. So it's just one of those things where it's like, does this, and that's kind of how I get about it is like, now I'm on Amazon, I'm looking at that NECA doll, and I'm just like, there might be a spot for Chucky in the near future.
And we always talk about the NECA figures. Anything that we own, obviously, we're huge horror fans. Looking at our backgrounds here, not just NECAs, but pretty much anything that you can kind of get those iconic franchises on. And honestly, I feel like Child's Play is just one of those franchises that has so many cool different merchandising opportunities where it's like you look at a lot of different things and you're like, "Man, I would love to own that." I mean, there's instantly the actual life size of a Chucky doll is something that a lot of people must have. It's something that I've had my eye on before. So it's like just the potential there for the merchandising aspect plus the bright colors of this. I mean, like I think that you end up being very drawn to where it's like, in the horror realm, a lot of things are black or they're red, whereas Chucky's very vibrant. He's in the movie, he's appealing to children, so he has to be that way. So I think it's um, very interesting kind of juxtaposition to kind of have this nice, very light, vibrant colors against this whole slasher element. I think that's a lot of fun. And just going into a lot of the merchandising that you do see, that's one of my selling points, legitimately. Where it's like when I see things like that, it's like those bright colors, they'll get me still, even as an adult. Adult, where it's like, man, I need to put that in my collection because it just pops.
No, and I think that that's a sticking point for me in this movie, in particular, is because with horror, especially slashers and stuff, you get a lot of that. It's always kind of leaning towards nighttime, and
Yep.
like in most setups, especially your Friday the 13th and your Halloweens, which are probably our flagship two characters there. It's always mundane introduction to characters, all that stuff's going on during the day, and then we kind of lead into the nighttime with more of the terror going on. The thing that I kind of enjoy about this, and not to get too far ahead, is just that like Chucky, for the most part, he doesn't give a shit. Like he'll do anytime, anywhere.
Yep.
And with him being kind of that childlike toy, the ability just to turn it on and off and just be, you're crazy, kid, this is just a toy, and then just to go into toy mode is just truly terrifying. I think, like, now that I can kind of look back at it with the with like my fresh eye and everything, and just see that there's a lot of times when characters are holding the murderous doll in their hands, and he could just flip it on at any second if he wanted to, but he doesn't. And I think the first one, that first initial real, we're seeing Chucky like in the flesh, like actually doing his thing, is when she picks him up
Yeah.
and sees the batteries. Well, she's picking up the box and she sees the batteries fall out. And then she goes and picks up the doll and checks the back, and then he just, goes crazy. It's like, what a great idea, really. Like, what a great effect. And I think that like they play with that a lot in this. They do a lot of great stuff in this. I think like watching the first film and this, I really like what they do with this story. These feel very much like Halloween and Halloween 2 to me, in a
Yes.
sense where they bleed into each other so well. And I think that they just like they kind of complement each other in a great spot. It almost gives you a real nice complete story. So it's like, even though I haven't seen the other sequels, um, if I never did, and this was Chucky for me, like this is all it was. This was Child's Play. It's definitely worth viewing. It's awesome. I really like it.
Yeah, no, in that kind of hiding in plain sight where we don't get that with any other horror icon, where it's like, you can be in the same room where you're talking the original Child's Play. I mean, like, how terrifying, especially going back, knowing the story of Child's Play, when Andy first gets Chucky and he is, the mother's friend is watching him, babysitting him, and he's playing with Chucky. He's got the builder's hat on him. They're using the toys, and we know that Chucky is alive, and the
Mhm.
babysitter doesn't even care, doesn't know anything about it. And then when she picks him up when it's time to go to bed, and she's just holding him carelessly as she was walking through the house, and knowing that he is eventually going to kill her. You know what I mean? Where it's like she was just holding him moments ago, and then he comes back out to turn on the TV, and then he gets her. So that building of tension while he's hiding in plain view is something you don't get in any other franchise like that. Just because this concept is so unique, you can't find it anywhere else. So it really adds to that tension of just watching of when is he going to turn it on? Is it going to be now? Is he going to wait? Because you do have so many of those moments in a lot of these films where you're like, well, is he going to turn it on? Is he coming to life now? And then they kind of build up, and he doesn't do it. And then they kind of flip that switch of they'll catch you off guard, and then he'll turn it on. So that kind of building of tension there, again, is something you can't get in any of the other franchises, because just the concept of Chucky in general is so unique.
No, I agree. And I think, like, it's something that I feel like I definitely took for granted a little bit when I was younger watching these movies. And I really can't put my finger on it, because this does really kind of, now watching it, it does really check a lot of my boxes as far as just kind of my interests and things like that. So it's just kind of one of those weird kind of just blank spots that I have in my horror catalog. That's another reason why we have the show and why we decided to start the podcast like this, is like, we're both horror fans, but there are still films, like you'd never seen Abominable.
No, never.
Before we did that. So it's like, I wanted you to see that. So it's like there's a lot of stuff that we overlap on, of course, but there's still stuff that either, you and I can still show each other and still introduce and, make fans out of, you know what I mean? Because it's like, I doubt without my intervention, is Abominable something you probably would have even thrown on?
It would have never been on my radar. Even if you would have told me about that in passing, I probably never would have committed to it. Yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
you probably would have given me the Blu-ray, and it probably would have sat, for a year before I was like, I never got a chance to watch this, So
Mhm.
I think that's part of the fun about doing this podcast, is we kind of force each other to commit to certain things because we have to watch it, and to get the kind of a different experience. Because to be honest, I was excited to have you watch Child's Play 2 for the first time, just because I have such a love for it.
Mhm.
And I was hoping, you'd come out of watching it with a positive experience.
No, I definitely did. So I guess without further ado, do you want to move into our first topic?
I think we should.
Alrighty, and this is a little segment that we like to call The Account of the Macabre.
The film which you are about to see is an account of the tragedy which befell a group of 5 youths, in particular, Sally Hardesty and her invalid brother, Franklin. It is all the more tragic in that they were young. But had they lived very, very long lives, they could not have expected, nor would they have wished to see as much of the mad and macabre as they were to see that day. For them, an idyllic summer afternoon drive became a nightmare. The events of that day were to lead to the discovery of one of the most bizarre crimes in the annals of American history, the Texas Chainsaw Massacre.
Alrighty, guys. So yeah, this is our segment where we like to kind of give a little rundown. As I said to Luke last week with Dog Soldiers, you know what I mean? Like he's real good at this, so I think he can sum these up real well for us and give us a nice little synopsis of the film. So we kind of get to go from A to B here, and then we kind of get to discuss the story throughout. So without further ado, Luke, let us know what Child's Play 2 is all about.
Oh boy. Well, let's get into it. Our favorite homicidal maniac with 5 points of articulation is back, but a little crispier than usual. After getting a makeover courtesy of the good folks at the Play Pals Corporation, Chucky is ready to steal some souls and do a little killing. As Chucky gets his soul back when his eyes are inserted in his sockets, it causes a power surge, electrocuting one of the workers, already adding to the body count in the first few minutes of the film. A prominent executive is tasked with getting rid of our favorite redhead, but not before he stops to grab some vodka for his hot rendezvous later that night. Before he gets the chance, he finds out he had a date with death that wasn't penciled in on his calendar. But unlucky for him, Chucky always keeps his commitments. Chucky takes his breath away, not just with his good looks, but with the help of a plastic bag from the back seat. Chuck makes his escape, not in search of a dollhouse to call home, but in search of his old pal, Andy. Living with new foster parents Phil and Joanna Simpson and foster sister Kyle, Andy is trying to start his new life without his mother, who has been committed to a psychiatric hospital. Trying to prove he is normal, He is a normal kid that wasn't stalked by a possessed doll with overalls and sneakers, becomes a tough task once Chucky shows up and disposes of the humdrum good guy doll Tommy, digging his grave under the swing set. Andy picks a bad time to come to terms with his good guy PTSD as he shows his foster parents he's willing to make amends with his plastic pal. Met with instant regret, Andy wakes up tied to his bed and Chucky sets a play date for his new game, Hide the Soul. But Kyle interrupts the two-player game when she sneaks inside Andy's room returning from a late night. Chucky aces his spelling test when he follows Andy to school and then puts Miss Kettlewell in a permanent timeout with a yardstick. As Andy's problems stack up, Chucky proves he isn't the marionette when he pulls the strings to get Andy sent back to the crisis center. Taking some drastic measures, Andy decides to do a little slicing and dicing of his own as he battles Chucky in the basement. When Phil interrupts the basement brawl, he takes a tumble, forgetting the most important thing the Wu-Tang Clan taught us, as Phil meets his demise when he forgets to protect his neck. Joanna blames Andy for her husband's death, sending him back to the crisis center. Fed up with a pint-sized plastic pal, Kyle throws him in the trash until she uncovers the remains of Tommy under the swing set in the backyard. Discovering Joanna's corpse, Chucky takes Kyle hostage as he rides shotgun to pick up their buddy Andy for a night on the town. After ditching Kyle, it becomes a boys' night as Chucky takes Andy to the Play Pals factory to continue his game of Hide the Soul. Unfortunately, Chucky cannot pass go or collect $200 as he turns human and becomes trapped in that damn good guy doll. Kyle and Andy make a run for it as Chucky pursues the duo. Proving to be his own worst enemy, Chucky loses his hand and his legs as Andy douses him with melted plastic, putting an end to his friend. Chucky comes back for one last scare, but being such a small guy with a big ego, his head gets too full as it explodes all over the factory. As Kyle and Andy make their way back home, wherever that may be, Chucky lays in pieces, proving that good guys finish last.
Very nice synopsis. Yeah, this is definitely an interesting take for a sequel to Child's Play. So, I guess we recounted a little bit of that first film, in our opening there, where we were just kind of discussing, our general thoughts here. But this picks up like in a perfect spot. Like I said, Halloween and Halloween 2, where it's like we're following Andy just after the incidents with the experience he went through with his mother in the first film. They say that his mom is in a psych ward because she decided to back his story, and the police decided to kind of keep quiet about it. Is kind of how they explain it away. Now, the thing that really off-put me a little bit beforehand is this general opening of them piecing together the good guy doll.
Yes.
And it's one of those things where I was just like, okay, like, why? I just didn't understand at first. Like, I was just kind of like, and mind you, I hadn't watched the first one before watching this. I hadn't rewatched it. So it's something where it's just kind of like, it's not as fresh. It's just, I had my memories that I had. But I was like, why the hell would they take the time to piece this thing back together? And it's a perfect, reasoning is just that they're looking to see if it did in fact have any defects that could have caused what the kid is claiming. And, I guess that's just like, some people would see that as like an scapegoat. I think it's a perfect excuse. I think that it's a nice way to set it up. It's a good way to get Chucky back in action, back together. And not have to do the whole thing where it's like, oh, he transferred his soul to another doll or anything like that. You know what I mean? I thought that was really a creative touch, and I really like that whole opening of them piecing him back together. It's creative.
Yeah, and I think that's one of the things for me that sticks out in my head is that opening credit scene where he's completely burnt to a crisp and they are just going through bit by bit, scraping off the burnt plastic and kind of redesigning him and putting him back together again. I think it's such an iconic scene. And for me, again, where I say this is my definitive Child's Play, that is one of the scenes that I think about in my head every time I go back to this. It's like that burnt Chucky as soon as we open up. And yeah, I think it's a convenient plot device, but I think it works. honestly, I think in terms of like these kinds of films, we're looking for something that's acceptable in our brains to kind of go from point A to point B. That's not too far fetched, and I think this plot device works, where it's just like, yeah, we need to put them back together to see if there are any issues here. So it's a convenient plot device, but it works well. It's not out of line for the tone of this film, and it's kind of like one of those things with the voodoo aspect. You would probably be asking yourself, well, what would be the next step here? If we didn't put him back together, does he not exist anymore? So I think this one really does work, and it makes some awesome visuals from the very beginning. The like I said, scraping of the burnt plastic. One of the things that really gets me is the scraping of the teeth, is just
Yeah.
because
Mhm.
the sound of that is so unsettling to begin with. So when they always go back to that, it gives me chills in my spine. So it's just like I think this is honestly probably one of the best openings I've seen in any horror film, because it really gets you ready for that thrill ride.
Yeah, it shows you the serial killer really getting built up, and the threat. And as soon as he's built, I mean, like it's within an instant, stuff starts going crazy. So it's kind of like the guys, one of the techs, and they're just talking about how, oh, we haven't built one of these manually in a long time. They're trying to get the eyes inserted, and it's almost like a Frankenstein moment where as soon as he gets the eyes inserted, this electric current kind of shoots through the device and shocks the guy to death. And you would have thought right then and there that would have sold him, but no, the money is too good for the CEO of this corporation. He's just like, make it disappear. None of this happened. And it's that's where we kind of get into where they stand with this whole thing, where they're just kind of like, yeah, they're just going to write it off as we're done here. Like the page is set, we're clear. We clearly didn't have anything to do with it, and they're just going to ignore anything that gets in the way of them making the big bucks with their good guy dolls.
And you bring up Frankenstein, and that was honestly a big inspiration for the director John LaFia, where he wanted to make this like a Frankenstein, and not jumping all over, but at the very end, when the one tech at the Playpals factory is watching TV, he is watching Frankenstein. So it's like he wanted to make those parallels, and he had said that when the eyes go into the Chucky doll, that's when he gets his soul back. So that kind of surge right there is really kind of the way he wanted to distinguish that, okay, this is the moment that Chucky comes alive. And one of the things I wanted to bring up was, now I didn't get a chance to get my hands on the screenplay for this or the novelization of this, because it's just too expensive. But there is a great audiobook. I forgetting the name of it. I'll tag it on the Twitter page, so that if people want a chance to go look at it and don't already own the novelization, it's a pretty fun kind of listen. I didn't get all the way through it before the podcast. I got about halfway, but it's very interesting. And one of the things that they do tackle this kind of opening of putting the Chucky doll back together, but it takes place like at 4 a.m. So it's a nighttime kind of deal, where it's just these two techs there doing their own thing, not in a crowded room or anything like that. Is in the film, they do it, it's broad daylight. You know what I mean? It's that kind of daytime horror where they're kind of just putting it together. A lot of movement going on. The CEO's talking to the executive. And they're in a room watching them. So it's like, it's very not as personal, but I think I honestly, I like the choice of making it daytime and kind of happening in this big mix of different techs and the CEO there watching all this stuff, where we don't have this feeling of claustrophobia. It's more so, it's broad daylight. What's really going to happen? Nothing bad can happen. And then he gets electrocuted. So I think that was for me, I think that choice works way better. I mean, think I have a fascination with daytime horror, because you don't see it as often as nighttime, since that's kind of part of the equation is, oh, if something scary is going to happen, it's got to be at night. So I like that choice that they do that during the day.
Yeah, and I like that comment about that's when he gets his soul back, because everybody, that famous quote of the eyes are the windows to the soul kind of
Yeah.
thing. So it's like, it's very much a lot of thought, you can tell, went into the resurrection of Chucky here. And like I said, it's almost instantaneous. He comes back to life and he starts causing havoc right then and there. Nobody questions why the doll is on the ground, across the room, once everybody kind of gets their composure and everything after this man's been electrocuted to death and everything. And it's just like, it's such an oversight. Like, and that's the thing. That's the beauty of this kind of horror, is that with it being this doll, this toy, it's like from just normal adults that just, they don't care. They're just not in it for that. They're just like, it is what it is. We're just kind of going to keep moving on here. And he can just do that, where it's like that hiding in plain sight. Like, he can turn it on and off, fool anybody he needs to fool. And then, when he does need to show up, he shows up. There's a great moment later on where that realization hits for a character, and it might be my favorite scene in the whole film, but we'll wait till we get there a little bit deeper. So, we have that, and then we kind of start catching up with Andy and kind of his situation a little more. I like the conversation between the therapist and him, where you can tell that the therapist has kind of been like coaching Andy to kind of say that his events from the previous film were a dream,
Yes.
in a way, where he's kind of, leading him into saying that stuff. And it's just like, it is, again, it's playing into that fact where nobody wants to believe the kid. You know what I mean? Like, nobody wants to say that, what happened here really happened.
Yeah.
Everybody just wants to say, it was a tragic accident, and, that they just want to put the kibosh on it. One thing I thought that was interesting, looking into some trivia for this film, and I didn't know if you were going to bring this up, so I'm sorry if I'm kind of overstepping, is that this was originally supposed to be set at Christmas.
Yes, it was. So supposedly that there may be some sort of treatment out there before Don Mancini had done the full screenplay, that there, it's just a rumor. I was not able to actually like find anything definitive. It's just like a little blurb that someone said. I had heard, I believe it was I don't know if it was a director from Pumpkinhead 2 may have done a pass at a treatment for this, and that idea of it being set at Christmas time originally came from that aspect of it. So I don't know if that is 100% truth or not, because I know Don Mancini had written the screenplay for it, but that is the reasoning, especially at the end with the factory, why there are so many good guy dolls, because it comes and ties around by that. And that I don't know where you're going with that, but that for me, I mean, we've talked about it. I think we've talked about it on the podcast. I know we've talked about it off the podcast. I also have a fascination with Christmas horror, and I think this would have been a perfect idea for that Christmas horror.
Yeah, I mean, Chucky in general would make a fantastic interpretation for a Christmas horror film. I mean, just the concept of kids getting toys alone and getting this good guy doll, like, you could do a lot with that. Like, if we ever get the time or the energy or the budget, we should definitely do a fan film where somebody gets a Chucky doll for Christmas. And go ahead.
Go ahead. Okay, what I was going to say is it would be very interesting and fun to do like on one street, each kid getting a Chucky doll and him kind of taking over each doll. You know what I mean? Kind of going house to house, almost like an anthology of these different instances on the same block, because everyone got the same good guy doll. So he just goes from house to house killing people. I think that would be a lot of fun.
You know that song where they're like, two turtle doves and a partridge in a pear tree? It's like almost like you could have it run with that, where it's like, on the first day of Christmas, my true love gave to me. And you kind of go through that. My take on that, not to get into this whole, thing, like, this would have been a great idea, because we're not keeping the segments of, they live in this one, because like you said, we couldn't get our hands on a script or anything. But this really, I think if we would have discussed it, would have been an excellent spot for that. But since we don't have it in this episode, we'll talk about it. Would be, how, like, sometimes, I don't know if you ever had this, you're always begging your parents on Christmas to let you open one gift on Christmas Eve. And sometimes they would.
Yes.
For me, most of the time, I could get a small gift. And, it was one of those things where it's like, what if a kid opened a gift and he got Chucky, and he opens them up, he's playing with them, he goes to bed, and he's kind of like hearing all these noises scurrying around, and he's making his way downstairs, and he sees his parents down there like sitting by the fireplace or whatever. And he's kind of like, "Oh guys, do you hear that? Like Santa's here." They're not responding, and it's just like they're dead. And Chucky has been scurrying around the house. He kind of can go down there, and the first thing he sees is that he ate the cookies or drank the milk or whatever. And it's like this whole play on that, where it's actually Chucky doing all that shit. Like, there's a lot of potential for Chucky set at Christmas time. Now, the reason that I brought that up, just so we don't get completely sidetracked, was primarily because, like, I think that this film could have really benefited from that. If I had to make any alteration at all, would be that I think that it's brilliant that they're playing with this whole Andy going to a new family thing, or at least a temporary family and all that. But could you imagine the kind of emotions and things that they could have played with if this was set at Christmas time, where it's like the time you're supposed to be close with your family and everything, and his mom's in a psych ward and everything, and he's just trying to get by, and it's like playing on the holiday blues kind of thing. I just think that would have been a really smart play for this movie.
And I know we're going to go down a rabbit hole here, but like just the aesthetic of Christmas alone, the events that take place. I mean, it could have been like A Christmas Story, but with a killer doll, just going to the mall, going to see Santa Claus, sledding, all this stuff. I mean, like one of the big things in the original, because I did watch it in preparation for this, is there's a scene where Andy's going to school and he's got the Chucky doll with him in his mom is talking to him before she sends him into school, and you can see their breath. And I remember sitting there thinking, oh my gosh, how bitterly cold was it? You know what I mean? And just the aesthetic of the cold Chicago winter, the snow on the ground, I think would have just been also added so much tension, especially if Andy's outside at any time, because that was a big play in the original. So it's like, I think, again, Christmas would have been perfect for this because there are so many different things. Even get-togethers, being with a foster family. How does that even work? Does he go to family events, functions, things like? I think it would have been very intriguing just from a storytelling perspective, and plus, like, how you'd always have Christmas parties at school, all that type of thing. So I think that would have just been a fun concept to play with. If they would have capitalized on it. But that's for us to now. We're adopting the Christmas Child's Play. So
yeah, and like you just had me think of this idea. You know how you do like a gift exchange at school?
Yes.
What if like Andy had like this nice cute little gift that his foster family had him make, and Chucky puts some like morbid thing in there, like maybe he's got like maybe one of the kids he's fostering with has like a pet rabbit or something, and he's given him something, and he ends up opening it, and it's like, oh, it's a rabbit's foot, and it's just covered in blood. It's like just blood and a rabbit's foot in there and stuff like that.
It says good luck on the card.
Exactly. Yeah, just something like that. And it's just like, you could really play with a lot of elements here. And again, it goes back to the brilliance of just like Andy being the true victim here, not just in a physical sense, but in that mental like game of chess that he constantly has to play with this toy, where this is an adult man who's a serial killer in this toy who is around every corner making this kid seem like he's fucking nuts when he knows he's not, when he knows there's danger here. And they do so much as we continue on with the story here that I love. I mean, not to get too far ahead, but again, with the introduction to that family heirloom, the statue and everything, it just gutted me when Chucky beats that doll, which I love that sequence, by the way, when he beats the other doll's face in and everything. I thought that was just a nice touch. It's something that I was definitely like, I like seeing him interact with another version of himself. That's obviously inanimate, but it's one of those things where it's just like, I was gutted because I knew where it was going. I knew exactly who was going to get blamed for this. And I was just like, no, dude, like, fuck, like give the kid a break. Cause it's like, they play with you with that, where it's like, it's not just the true horror, but it's that psychological element. It is that whole thing of like, oh man, like Andy not only has to deal with this because of, people getting killed, but he also has to deal with the fact that this guy can literally do anything and nobody will believe him. Not a single person is going to think that it wasn't him because obviously he's a kid who's been through some trauma.
And I think it works on such a different level of frustration because, I mean, looking at A Nightmare on Elm Street with Nancy, no one believes that there's a man in her dreams coming that's going to actually kill her to a certain extent, but like at least there she has a friend circle, Johnny Depp and all of them that are like, oh wait, I'm seeing him too. So she kind of has the circle of people she can kind of lean on because they're starting to figure out something's a little fishy. But here it's Andy, very innocent kid. And I mean, we'll get into the actor himself later, but even going into that original, Andy is a kid, and props to the actor where I legitimately feel bad for. You know what I mean? Like, I want to see this kid succeed. Like going back to that first film where he's making his mother breakfast in bed and he's just spilling stuff all over. He's dressed like the good guy. I mean, it's just like this kid's so cute. He's adorable. You just want to hug him, and nothing works out for him. You know what I mean? So kind of going into the Child's Play 2 story, what a smart play. I think it was Don Mancini specifically was pretty adamant about making him into that foster setting where it's like he has no circle of people to lean on him. His mother believed him. Detective Mike Norris believed him. So by the end of that first film, he had kind of this group of people that were like, oh, wait, you're seeing this too. But they strip all that away here. And he's back. He's in the system. No one believes him. They just think he's mentally disturbed, clearly a troubled kid coming from a background from the mother who's now at a psychiatric ward. So it's kind of like we're starting from square one here. No one believes Andy, and it's like us as the audience, we know the game. We've seen him in action in the first film. So it's like kind of such a new level of frustration for us where we're seeing Andy get in trouble and he can't catch a break. And then we know bodies are going to start stacking up because no one listens to Andy. I think it's just I think putting him in that foster setting was honestly probably one of the best devices you could use in making a sequel.
No, I agree. I think that it is used very well here, and I think that what I really enjoyed was the interactions too with the characters. I like that there was only one other kid to interact with, and I really do think that Kyle is an excellent addition to the series. She
Absolutely.
doesn't come back in the others, does she?
I don't want to spoil anything. She doesn't come back in any of the movies.
Okay, so she might be making a return in something recent then.
Maybe.
Okay, cool. Because like I really enjoyed her character. Let me see who was her actress there. Um,
What's her name? Is that what you're looking
Christine,
for?
yeah,
Yeah.
Christine Ellis.
Yeah. Elise, maybe? I'm not sure.
Elise, yeah, okay, yeah, she's um I really enjoyed her performance. I thought that she was charismatic, but still didn't take any shit from anybody. And just like a really different kind of teenager. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? Like they have that whole element of her um talking about how, oh, I need to work because I'm going to be on my own next year, and she's got that responsible outlook, you know what I mean, as to where a lot of teenagers are written to just throwing everything to the side. But no, you can tell that like Don Mancini, when writing this character, really took into account like he's being a little more realistic with that sense, you know what I mean, of just saying like, maybe at least some of these kids will kind of have their head on straight and think that, hey, like my life's about to turn out pretty fucking serious here. Maybe I do need to get my stuff together. Because, it's so easy to go for the tropes. And I mean, we love it. We watch our Friday the 13th where the kids are not a care in the world. They're just smoking pot, having sex, like all expected. But like it's refreshing to have a competent, intelligent, teenage character in a horror film like this. And I think it juxtaposes very well with that whole serial killer angle because like that's the thing that like really I feel like I start to appreciate more about the Chucky character is that Charles Lee Ray element to it. You know what I mean? It's something that like, I look at Chucky as the doll, but you really have to look at it as this, pretty infamous serial killer.
Yeah.
At the end
He's
of
a
the
very
day, it's
vile,
not
vile character.
it's not just a killer doll at the end of the day. This is a man who is using this body as a vessel, and I mean it's like at the end of the day he's a monster, and he's done horrible things throughout his in his career. So it's just one of those things where it's just like it's those mind games, and to see these smart characters play that with him, it's just, I think it really does take these two movies and really it runs with it, and it runs really well.
Yeah, and I mean, going into there's a lot of great stuff going in this movie, from filmmaking to the writing, where you're talking about the addition of the Kyle character, and I think you look at that, and I'm talking about he has no kind of support system in terms of anyone that's really believing him, and you make that Kyle character, I don't know, 5 years younger, I think maybe it would have resonated with Andy a little bit more to say, she would have probably been in that headspace to be like, well, that doll could be coming alive. You're in a very much of a kid's headspace, but she is almost an adult at that point. So yes, you can look at Kyle and be like, this character's been through the system. She knows what to expect out of, the foster parents, and Andy's this is his first foster family. He's not intended to be in the system very long, hopefully, but and to be back with his mother at some point. But it's like he looks at Kyle almost as someone he can try and resonate with, but again, she's at a very different point in her life. She's going to be officially an adult, so she's not going to be really believing Andy. He kind of wants to make that friendship with her, but she sees him as the annoying new kid. So she's not
Mhm.
going to believe that. She's in the same group as the adult, saying, "Well, that doll's not alive. You're just a troubled kid." So he again doesn't really have that support system, and I think it was so intentional by Don Mancini to be like, well, let's put another character in here, but it's not going to resonate with Andy at all because they're in different walks of life here, So, and I think that's very interesting to see kind of where she's at, having been through the system fully and going to becoming an adult, whereas Andy's coming in totally fresh, So there's a lot of very smart screenwriting here that a lot of people would just look off. Oh, it's a killer doll that comes to life and slashes people, but there's a lot of care taken into this story as a whole.
Yeah, and I mean, like, I think you reach a certain point, and I'm gonna have to bring it up now. The scene that I was alluding to as a favorite of mine is really the death of Phil.
Yes.
I thought that was so unexpected because it's kind of one of those things where it's like you've seen similar stories to this told before, in the essence of the kid has this thing going on, the adults don't believe him, and you think that when he's getting set up here that this is just and you've seen it happen a couple times in this film alone, where it's just like Chucky's got him in a situation where it's going to look bad the second an adult walks in and Chucky's inanimate and he's not being himself. He's framing Andy, and you think you're getting into that because Andy takes a turkey carver, an electric one, and he goes downstairs to go and fight Chucky in the basement. And, he gets him, he cuts his hair a little bit, and Chucky runs off. And when Phil comes down, he's slowly approaching him. What I did not expect was for Chucky to take him out right there. He fucking, what's he got, like a hook of some kind, or like a
Yeah, I don't know if it
pole?
was like a fire poker, maybe. You know how
Something.
and he
It
just like
looked
sweeps
pretty
his leg
big to
there.
be a fire poker, but again, it's in Chucky's hands, so he's pretty small. Um, but like it was one of those things where he grabs him by the ankle, and he basically has him fall down the steps or fall off the steps, breaking the wood and snapping his neck. Um, the fact that he engages him though is what I really
Yes.
appreciated. I love the line of dialogue. I can't think of it.
He
But
said,
I just
"How's it hanging, Phil?"
yeah, how's it hanging, Phil? Like that to me, because it validates Andy, but it's too late. It's too late at that point because you could see the oh shit on Phil's face, and they sold it really well. And what's coming the second that Joanna and Kyle show up and they see the dead body and everything. And the thing that I appreciated, and where I'm kind of circling back here to it, is that Joanna's heartbroken. Like she's given up on Andy completely at this point. Like she's packing his stuff. She thinks he's a monster, all this stuff. And, she's distraught. Her husband is dead. And she blames herself because, up to this point, Phil has been kind of saying, I don't think we're equipped to deal with Andy. I don't think we can help this kid. I think that he's too traumatized and all that, which is kind of like this whole thing through the film. And Kyle plays both sides here. You know what I mean? Where she's not like condemning Andy. She's like, she's still sympathetic towards the kid because she understands, you know, a little bit of like, you know, he didn't do this. Like, he didn't kill him, clearly. But it is one of those things where it's like, the poor kid's been through so much, and now, you know, this family that's been so kind to her is turning their back on him. And, you know, so she kind of plays both sides there, where she's like sympathetic towards him, but also sympathetic towards Joanna, who just lost her husband. And I thought that was just such a mature take, and a really wonderful take, for that character, and just for these characters in general. And something, you know, going into a Child's Play film, like I said, with my kind of expectation and introduction of anything but the first movie, you know, I didn't anticipate that. I didn't anticipate the characters to be as well rounded as they are.
And there's a lot to unpack in everything you just covered, but like to going back into just the concept of Andy being in that system, the foster parents, and then Kyle telling him, well, you know, these parents aren't bad at all. You know, some of the ones that she's been with are absolutely horrible. And then the idea that Andy's so afraid that if they think that is a troublemaker, they're going to send him back to the crisis center. And that kind of fear that he has, you know, he is totally afraid of Chucky, but then becomes aware that, you know, Phil has his doubts about Andy himself. So, you know, they have that wonderful scene where I think is Andy coming up. I don't know if he's coming up from the basement or where he was, but he's on the one side of the door hiding, you know, just coming up. And then Phil and Joanna are having that discussion where Phil's like, I don't know if we can keep him. And she, you know, and she's kind of making the case that she likes him. And then he decides to go pick up at that time. No, it's Chucky at that time. So he goes and picks him up, you know, and he goes, I hate you, you know, but he's gonna, you know, pick him up just for appearances, to look like he's, you know, kind of getting over the idea of the good guy doll coming to life. And then, of course, we get the classic callback as he picks up Chucky. He's got to check to see if the batteries are in there, you know. And yeah, I think that's a wonderful callback where we open it up and the batteries are in there, so he can breathe easy, you know. So I think that was such a fun concept, but like to kind of get in that headspace of Andy and the fear that he has, and that new dynamic of, you know, he's dealing with his mother in the first film, and she loves him no matter what. She's not going to get rid of him. But again, I think he looks at himself as disposable to these foster parents because they have a revolving door of kids coming in and out. So I think that tension that they build there, and kind of almost forcing him to come to terms with the idea that, you know, this good guy is not real, and then the expectation becomes okay, it's just a doll, and then it turns out, nope, it's goddamn Charles Lee Ray. You know what I mean? So it's
Yeah.
like in that kind of flipping it on its head, where he's hanging out with the doll, then he goes to sleep, and he wakes up with a sock in his mouth tied to his bed. And again, you know, we're jumping all over. This is kind of more of a production thing, but I'm going to put it in here right now because I love it so much. Is that spinning camera? It's like flipping the world. You know what I mean? Is how I always take that of, you know, he's thinking one thing, and then as soon as he wakes up and realizes Chucky is Charles Lee Ray, is the doll. So it's like you just flip his world completely, and we're off to a completely new story. So it's like, you know, duped again for Andy. You know, he can't catch a break, and again, that kind of adds to my love for Andy, where, you know, you just want this kid to succeed and get past everything, and then this Lakeshore Strangler just keeps coming.
Yeah, and I think like you said, we are kind of jumping all over the place here. But because I think we need to kind of keep moving in our segments here, I do want to touch on a couple other key points. You know, and I think, you know, it's already clear we could talk a lot about the nuances and just kind of that the hiding in plain sight, I think, is the best term that you used when discussing Chucky as a character, and just kind of how this works out and that dynamic. I think we've had a great conversation about that, but I want to talk a little bit about the Miss Kettlewell sequence.
Yes.
I thought that was really a great intense
It's one of my
kind
favorite.
of kill.
I've wanted to use it on a certain segments for our weekly show, but I haven't gotten around to it yet. But it's one of my favorites, favorite kills. Honestly, it's in my top four of just kills overall in terms of horror films because I think it's so well done.
Yeah, the only thing, but I mean, I get it. It's a different time. Is just why the hell is she locking this kid in a classroom? Like that's terrible teaching. Like you cannot do that. What if like something horrible happens and then the kid can't get out? You know what I mean? But just like the way it all plays out, you know what I mean? Where it's like, you know, Andy's having a pretty normal day. He is the new kid. He's getting bullied. You know, he's doing his thing. And the way that Chucky gets on his homework and writes "fuck you, bitch" on there,
Yes.
and she finds it and she holds him after class. The whole setup is great because you know what's coming, and the payoff is even better. I mean, just when she thinks that Andy's in the closet with the Chucky doll, and then Chucky reveals himself, just that malicious like way that he's just like, you can tell that's when the serial killer comes out, where it's just like you could tell he's reveling in it. He's having so much fun. I mean, what's he stab her with first off?
Oh my gosh. And this is where I want to go back to, where it's like tongue in cheek and I absolutely love it mixed with
Mhm.
this graphic horror. He stabs her initially with one of those pumps that inflates the balls because
Yeah,
yeah,
yeah. Oh
and then he
man.
just sprays the air. It's like I absolutely love that stuff where he mixes that terror with again, I think this is where comedy and horror kind of meld together perfectly. They make a great marriage in a film like Child's Play 2.
And I think like that's just something I never would have thought of, but like, could you imagine getting stabbed with something like that and having the not only the initial stabbing, but the air getting pumped into you as
Yeah.
well with the pushing, and then just to have him approaching her with the ruler, because like, you know, a ruler, I mean, you could fuck somebody up with that. Like, I
Yeah.
mean, you break that, it's just a spear at that point, you know what I mean? So it's like you break that in enough spots, and like it's really intimidating shit. Like watching him kind of come out and walk, and you really got to give it. I mean, we'll kind of save that praise for creatures features, but I mean, like just the stuff with him coming out of the closet there and just him walking over to her, it's like it sells it really well, and it's
Yeah.
not bolstered by CG at all. Like it's all practical effect, and like it's a really tense, awesome sequence.
And that's where it's like going into when you were talking about Phil and coming to the realization that Chucky is alive, and again here with Miss Kettlewell, all these characters before Chucky kills them are trying to process something mentally that you
They
cannot.
just
You know what
can't.
I mean? Where it's like this doll's coming to life and is trying to kill me. So it's like I don't even you can't before you meet your demise. So it's like a very interesting kind of dynamic, I guess, where you're kind of battling with a lot of mental things while this is happening. And we kind of get a little callback or a little tribute, and probably not intentional to Silver Bullet, where the yardstick kill. You know how he
Yeah,
did it in the through the fog with
the baseball
the
bat.
policeman. Yep. So it's like
Mhm.
I thought that was funny. But yeah, again, that yardstick kill is one of my favorites. Just going into the beginnings of that kill. Yeah, I told you before that this is the film that gave me like severe PTSD of Chucky and dolls coming to life. One of the scenes that stuck with me as a kid was when Andy gets on the bus and as it's pulling away those little feet of
Yeah,
Chucky
dangling.
dangling.
Oh
I
man.
I used to think that like I remember riding in the back seat of my mother's car and always thinking that Chucky's feet are dangling in the back of the car because I would always be convinced that Chucky was. I had no reason to think that Chucky was going to come after me. I didn't own a good guy doll, but I always thought that Chucky was going to be hitching a ride in my mom's car.
Something about these little killer fuckers that it's a sentence, little killer fuckers. Um just they really get under your skin, because like that's how I felt about like Leprechaun.
Yeah,
Like Leprechaun unsettled me to an extent. And maybe, now I'm connecting some dots. Maybe that could be a reason, because I saw that before I saw this. It could be a reason why I just never had an interest in Chucky as deeply.
yeah.
Because Leprechaun scared the fuck out of me when I was a kid. Like I hated that. It was that and Pennywise. So it's just one of those things where it's like maybe to an extent. Like, that's why I never really latched onto him as much, because I just knew that I was probably going to get the same kind of experience with Chucky that I got with Leprechaun.
And going into like that kind of concept as we're talking about this, where I put like Chucky and Pennywise in kind of a very terrifying compartment of horror for me, because those are very real things where it's like I can see a clown at a circus, I can see a clown anywhere, and that terrifies me. So I own action figures, I own dolls, my sister owns dolls, you know what I mean, that could be coming to life when I'm trying to sleep. And so it's like, I'm not going to be at Crystal Lake. I'm not going to see Jason. You know, I don't live in Haddonfield. I'm not going to see Michael. But like, there are dolls in my house as a kid. So it's like that fear of those coming to life or just a clown showing up. Those are really real fears as a child for me. So it's like, I feel like those things were really giving me PTSD in a sense, because they could actually happen on the day to day.
Yeah, and I know, again, just so we can kind of keep moving into our topics, I wanted to discuss the climax a little bit with the warehouse.
Yes.
Really just a genius final setting. I know, if you didn't already have this, I know that Don Mancini initially wanted in the first film for it to end in the warehouse with the assembly of the Chucky dolls and everything like that. And that's a great place to put it. Like, I think that, kind of bringing him back to form. It really ties in great with the beginning of the film. Also, seeing that, I mean, just all that goes on here with the maze of Chucky boxes and everything. It's like you're talking about, kind of the coloring a little bit earlier, and just having them surrounded by those yellows and reds and whites and blues, and just this innocence. And it's like they aren't hiding any of it in shadow. And that's what I think is so impressive about this movie, is that like everything is well lit. Everything is, just in your face. They're showing Chucky doing all this, and it's great. It's really, it plays fantastic. Like, I mean, I couldn't be happier with kind of how this all goes down. Um and I mean, then once you start getting into kind of the macabre of him, getting his hand stuck, so he rips that off and he replaces it with a knife and everything. Like, it's just all real creative stuff, and you really get to see how malleable this character is, and just what he's willing to go for and what he's willing to do to get this kid. And I thought that it was a fantastic climax. I think that it ends, and like I said, if you put these as kind of like the definitive Chucky 2-part film, like this is the whole story and you never did anything else with it, like it's a perfect ending for this
Yeah.
whole story.
And I love that factory scene as well. Now I know that like the factory scene as well as the spelling, or the school scene, all that stuff was in the original screenplay that they were not able to use during that time, so they ended up reusing it for this. This was John Lafayette does a interview, and he talks about how he felt a sort of a competition as soon as he was able to direct Child's Play 2, that he felt like they could do better than the original. Not in a bad way, but he feels like that there was more potential there that wasn't realized, and he wanted to take it a step farther, which I really do think they do here. So looking at it now on film here, where that the teacher school scene and that factory scene, uh, two definitive sequences in Child's Play 2. So it's like to know that those were potentially going to be used in Child's Play and didn't make the cut. It's like those are really big scenes that are really well done. And I looking at it, I really don't know if they would have hit in the original Child's Play. And I'll get into that later on when we talk maybe more so about creatures features, because I think there's a lot of perfecting certain things that maybe you wouldn't have been able to show, or kind of would have had to kind of cut away or maybe left off screen because the effects just weren't there yet. So you wouldn't be able to take full advantage of those types of scenes. But like going into that factory scene, John Lafayette does say that like he wanted to make that factory scene different, not your run of the mill industrial kind of factory, which you do get some of that, but he wanted to make it as you see the bright colors. It going back to kind of the merchandising of the good guy dolls. It's very bright. He wanted to make it feel. He describes it almost Willy Wonka-esque, which I
I
think
was
you really
literally
get.
about to say it feels like you're stepping into the chocolate factory, but for toys.
Yes, and you really get that feel, and I think that's kind of like stepping, um, kind of melding that almost industrial feel with the kind of child play of like the perfect coloring. I think is a very unique kind of marriage that he does there. I think the set design is perfect.
I was gonna say very Santa's Workshop, like
Yes, yes,
bringing it
and see,
back
and
to our
again, just
Child's Play Christmas special.
yeah, and just again having this set on Christmas, I think would have probably upped this, turned the volume up even more, and given me even a bigger love, if that's possible, for Child's Play 2. But one of the things that I do want to talk about in terms of story here is I think it goes into a new level of terror as soon as we realize that Chucky has turned human, which I think is a
Hmm.
smart play because he's trying to avoid that all throughout the original Child's Play, and then kind of that worst fear happening in Child's Play 2, it gives you a whole new concept because it's kind of like it changes the dynamic because he's trying to, I guess, preserve Andy in a sense because he wants his vessel. So he can't kill Andy, but as soon as he turns human, he's just pissed. So he's spending the rest of the time just running through the factory trying to kill Kyle and Andy because they've ruined his plan. So and then to think that this doll has turned human and rips off his own hand and then drives a knife into what's left and then um, loses his legs. And I will say that scene of when he goes in there to be mangled, um, and his screams are so unsettling to me because he's human at that point, so he's feeling everything. So kind of going into that is just absolutely terrifying. So I think they do a lot of fun stuff in that factory. They make the most out of their time. I don't know, I didn't time it because sometimes I like to go, as soon as they step into the factory to the end, but I didn't do that because it moves very fast. They cover a lot of stuff, but it doesn't feel like they linger on anything.
Yeah, no, I would agree. I think that like it doesn't linger too long. But like it is something that like everything that they show is effective. Even up to the great sequence with the eyes getting gouged
Yeah,
into that technician's head, like that's such a satisfying kill. And again, just so creative. So like
yep,
the creativity in this film, it seems almost endless at this point, where it's just like everything is just so well thought out, and they have just a lot of fun with what they're doing. They really, again, you named it again with that whole Child's Play like uh element to it, is like that you could tell they're having so much fun making this movie when it comes to the creativity of everything.
yeah. You
um
could tell that they had a lot of different ideas and they were bouncing them off each other. It's like you don't come up with these kinds of things unless you're invested in the story and the characters, which you can clearly tell here. Another awesome scene is, and I don't know if you own it. They made a Funko Pop of it, of the Child's Play where he's lost his legs and he's on the little thing wheeling himself around. I think it's even got the squeaky wheels where he's just trying to like pull himself toward Andy. Like this dude just keeps coming, even though he's lost his legs completely, and he's just dragging a trail of blood behind him. I mean, what an awesome visual. So interesting, so different, especially in that first one where he just catches fire and then he kind of falls to pieces where they're shooting him, which is interesting enough, but like they really put him through the ringer in the ending factory scene of this.
yeah, I personally, like, I had that Funko Pop. I did trade it to a friend when I was working at the exchange because he's a huge Chucky fan, and like I said, I wasn't at the time. I got it out of a box um when they did those horror boxes at like Hot
Yeah.
Topic.
Yep.
It was one of those where it was an exclusive there. But yeah, no, seriously, wonderful stuff. But I think we've discussed probably for about 50 minutes here
We've
of
exhausted it.
just the account of the macabre. So I am going to kick us off into the next segment that we call Behind the Mask.
Happy, happy Halloween, Halloween, Halloween. Happy, happy Halloween, Silver Shamrock.
It's almost time, kids. The clock is ticking. Be in front of your TV sets for the Horathon. And remember the big giveaway at 9. Don't miss it. And don't forget to wear your masks. The clock is ticking. It's almost time.
Happy, happy Halloween, Halloween, Halloween. Happy, happy Halloween, Silver Shamrock.
We got to start a Halloween countdown.
Yeah, that's not a bad idea, my friend. I kind of like that. So yes, Behind the Mask, this is where we kind of talk about the production side of these films, kind of what's going on behind the scenes, who was responsible for what, whether there were any interesting stories and whatnot. So Luke, this being your pick, what do you got for us as far as production on this bad boy?
Oh boy. Well, we are talking the official release of Child's Play 2, but of course, it had to be a rocky road getting here. Very unique kind of story here, especially with the world we're living in today. With in 2019, we had a Child's Play film coming out, as well as now we have the Chucky series, and it just being called Chucky. It very unique, very different. I mean, this has happened, I guess, a few different cases, but this is probably the most prominent, especially in the horror realm. I'll read a little blurb here, and then we can kind of get into, I guess, the meat of the subject here. Christopher Skase, I believe his name was the majority shareholder of Quintex Group, a venture capitalist that attempted to purchase MGM/United Artists in March of 1989. During the time Child's Play 2 was going into shooting that October, Skase was not interested in creating horror films. They wanted to focus more on the Disney films. So the deal eventually fell through as Skase was charged with improperly using to obtain management fees. He fled Australia and relocated to Spain, where he lived until his death in 2001, where he died of stomach cancer. So this is very interesting because we get this kind of, again, Child's Play 1, the initial film, was a huge deal for MGM United Artists. And so I think that they had seen the potential there of creating more films, and they had greenlighted the sequel, John Lafia and Don Mancini coming back to do everything. And then they got the call saying, we're not going to be making these types of films anymore because we're going to be selling, and we just give you the rights back. So they ended up in, I guess you would say, like a bidding war between, there were a handful of studios that were wanting to kind of get this property under their umbrella. So you had a couple, let me see here. Let's see. We had a Paramount was one, Warner Brothers, Columbia, 20th Century Fox, New Line Cinema, and of course Universal. So the teetering aspect here was Steven Spielberg, oddly enough.
Really?
Do you not know about this?
No, I don't.
Oh, okay. Let me find it here. So Steven Spielberg, who worked with David Kirshner, who was the producer who ended up getting the rights initially back. They worked together on American Tail, and Steven Spielberg convinced him to give Universal the first shot at making the sequel. So they called in a favor to Spielberg to call Kirshner to say, hey, try to just give Universal the first shot at this. And that's how Universal came to actually own the Child's Play property.
It's so crazy how much weight that name holds in this industry. Yes. You get Steven Spielberg on the phone with anybody, they're kind of going to be like, what the fuck am I supposed to do? It's Steven Spielberg. He is quintessentially Mr. Hollywood. He is the guy when you think of filmmaking. It's just insane to me. He's got so few misses in his catalog. It's like, if you even want to call them misses, it's more just things like that. And if we ever reboot by admission, he's somebody that I would clearly, if you look at my shirt, love to cover extensively. Spielberg's a genius. But
Yeah.
yeah, that's crazy to think that he has his hands in this too, because it's like, I mean, he's infamously it's talked about, and I kind of feel like this is a little disheartening now because I'm such a Toby Hooper fan. It's infamous that everybody talks about how Poltergeist was ghost directed by Spielberg. So like he directed the film, but didn't want his name on it. So it's one of those things where it's just kind of like, man, it's crazy to think how he shepherded things. Like he's not just shepherding things in, your standard film cinema world. He's shepherding things in the horror realm, sci-fi. It's like he's just got his hands in everything.
Yeah, especially to get that call in 1989 to be like, "Hey, it's Steven. Maybe you should give Universal a first shot." And I think that kind of says how big of a property Child's Play
Yeah,
was, to kind of have
the
the hey,
potential there was huge.
yep. Because again, and it's very interesting to see the trajectory that Child's Play went on. Because you had the first three films, and I believe 3 was in 91, so it came shortly after 2. From what I know, I don't know if it hit that well, but we didn't really see anything till Bride, which was the end of the 90s. So you would have thought that Child's Play would have pumped out, we'd be looking at Child's Play 10 by 2001, but that was not the case. It really was dormant for the majority of the 90s. It started at the beginning of the 90s, and then we saw it pick up at the end of the 90s. But throughout the mid 90s, we didn't really see anything from it, which was interesting to see how much potential it started with, and then it kind of just fizzled out after a little bit. But again, that first Child's Play, absolutely so iconic. I mean, they said it was an unexpected hit, so it's just like you can really see the groundwork that it laid, especially for Child's Play, and then Child's Play 2 to come. What in I believe was it 88, and then in 90, where we're talking we're in Jason Takes Manhattan, we're in Freddy's Dead, so we're not really into the whole golden ages of horror. We're coming out of uh, the slasher run, if you will, and we're kind of moving on to different properties here. So for Child's Play to come out and hit like it did, I think is a real testament to the concept in general.
Yeah, no, I mean, like it's definitely, it shows why he is still a character that sticks around today, why some people associate him with that Mount Rushmore of horror, why he makes it in those like conglomerations of all these horror characters sitting around a table and stuff like that. Like Chucky's usually there. And it's like he does have a big cultural impact. And I mean, again, for certain generations, maybe even in today's generation, it's a little harder to kind of see that. And maybe the series is kind of rebooting some of that for him, because for me, it, kind of getting my exposure, because like I was born in 98, so it's one of those things where it's like, for me, really around 2004 2005 is when I kind of start to take notice of these things more or less, and like they can actually articulate kind of what it is. So it's kind of one of those things where it's like I wasn't in the peak Child's Play era, but looking back now and seeing kind of what the boom was for these first two movies and just that first film in general, like I can clearly see why he matters so much to a lot of people, and to why he is as held in such high regard as he is. And I mean, again, watching this movie does nothing more than cement that for me, and it just makes me understand that, like, I get it now. Like I understand why this character is so loved. Like you said, this film really is like, we have the introduction, now we have the proving ground here. The proof of concept is fully realized.
Yeah, and you can tell it felt like Universal was really behind this, in terms of where they wanted to take it and what they could do. Because I know John Lafia went over budget quite a bit in terms of different shots and things like that. But it felt like Child's Play 2 feels like it's on a bigger scale, I would say. They take way more advantage of shots of Chucky and kind of showing how he works and things like that. My question to you is, so we're talking late 80s, early 90s here. Different studios bidding on the Child's Play property. New Line Cinema is one of the ones that's once Chucky under their umbrella. Eventually, we get Freddy versus Jason way, way, way down the road. But at this time, they were talking, early 90s, Freddy versus Jason. That's what they wanted to do. They never really got there. Would you have liked to have seen Chucky join the New Line Army, or do you think he should have just it worked out for the best in him going to Universal?
I mean, like, I don't know if I would have liked to see him get crossed over with those characters. I think if you're gonna do it, um, if you're ever gonna bring Chucky into the fold with something like that, it needs to be in the ultimate slasher mashup. I think, like, if you're ever gonna do something like that, of course I'd like to see it. I don't think it's gonna be great. But I my curiosity would get the best of me, and it's like, of course I want to see Leatherface and Michael Myers and Freddy and Jason and Chucky and Ghostface, all these people show up on screen together, with Ash leading the good guys, and we got Amy Steele coming back, and we got all these other people, Sidney Prescott, everybody, just making their debuts, coming back to fight all these guys. Like, it'd be amazing. Like, it would seriously be the end game of all horror franchises. Like I said, whether it's good or bad, I would be sold on a ticket. You know what I mean? Like, but for me, I think that it's nice for, I think, Universal to have gotten the rights to this. I mean, it really doesn't matter to me at the end of the day who's distributing the film. It only really matters the quality and the creative team behind it, because production companies and production houses are just the money at that point. Like, they're just the ones putting it out there and distributing it. And as we've seen a lot on this podcast and many before it, they're usually more problems than they are solutions in a lot of ways. So it's just kind of like, if he ended up in the house that Freddy built, I think it would have been fitting. But at the end of the day, it's like, sure, Universal got him. He hangs out over there with Jaws and all those other characters. So it's like, he's
That's the
got Dom
mashup we want to
Toretto
see.
and T-Rex, and oh yeah, Chucky versus Jaws.
Yes.
I mean, my boy's taking it home the whole way. I'm telling you, like, he's just
I
too
don't
big.
know. If Chucky doesn't turn human, I think he's gonna have the edge. He's gonna go in his stomach and cut him up. Be done.
No, because Jaws has all these little offspring that keep popping up. So you
And
just get bigger Jaws.
They even hunt you down. They zero in on you and they hunt you down to Florida or wherever it is. But anyway, I
Hawaii.
digress. Getting back into our Child's Play talk. Yeah, I think it would have been. I don't know. I'm glad he ended up at Universal. I feel. With New Line, I know that sometimes the studio kind of gets their ideas going and things like that, and to know where Jason had went in the earlier 90s, as well as where Freddy was going with Freddy's Dead. I think kind of leaving Child's Play as its own thing at a different studio was the best bet to go with, just because I mean, looking at this one, you could tell that they really made a play to try and try to make this a sustainable franchise. Now 3 is where you get really questionable, but I think it all ended for the best for this to kind of, again, Child's Play 2, my definitive one. So I don't know if any of the other studios that would really have fit. I was trying to look to see if there were any really definitive horror films coming out at that time for any of the studios, and nothing really popped out at me saying, oh, these are, oh, look at this. So I think this studio maybe had a real knack for horror. Again, at the time where horror was going, I think there was a lot of fatigue there. So I think kind of Child's Play is that anomaly to be like, oh, I think this idea was unique enough to kind of get a horror audience back to be like, I'm intrigued by this, to see where they go. And then to go from that first film to that second film where they really do feel different, I guess. One of the things that John Lafayette does say is that first film felt more naturalistic. They shot on location. It was very different. It feels like a movie to me. When you look at this one, it's very exaggerated. They wanted to take you. It feels more so as an experience, as we talk about with the colors, things like that. And that first film, he was eh, he talks about it being told through the lens more so of an adult. Where yeah, Andy is a character, but it's about his mother not believing him and thinking maybe something is wrong with Andy mentally. And in that second film, he really wanted to tell it from a child's perspective. So he really wanted to kind of give it a different feel, and I think that's pretty evident through a lot of the things that John Lafayette does in terms of choices he makes while directing. In terms of he used a lot of wide angle lenses because he felt like that through looking through the eyes of a child. The world is a big place, so he kind of wanted to make those scenes as big as possible. And then when you look at it, the camera set very low. It's always tilted up to a lot of the adults because we're kind of looking at them as authority figures in a sense. So we really do kind of make the most of seeing this through the lens of a child. And that's where I think there's such a different feel here as opposed to that original film.
No, no, no. That's a very good way of putting it. I think that it definitely. I appreciate when there's a level of care and just thought process put into something like this, where it's like we do want to look at it through the eyes of a child. We do want to present it, in the light that it's supposed to be. Like the
Yeah.
kind of story we're telling. Well, I guess unless you have anything else for us for Behind the Mask, I think we can move on to our next segment.
I do want to bring up one little thing here.
Okay.
One last little thing. I don't know if you know the origins of the Chucky concept, and I know we're talking more so about Child's Play 2, but I think this kind of does play into uh, Child's Play 2, especially when we're talking about John Lafayette being the director. I don't know if if you did any research in terms of how the kind of voodoo aspect of Child's Play came to be,
No.
or where Child's Play initially started, maybe.
Well, actually, there was one thing that was mentioned in some of my research that initially the voodoo angle wasn't even a part of it. That
Correct.
it
Yeah.
was going to be the child, the doll gained its power from the frustrations and anger that
Yeah.
came from Andy.
Yes, and that was a Don Mancini call. So initially, the screenplay was called "Batteries Not Included," but there's another
Mhm.
film that was being made at the time, so they switched that out for Bloody Buddy. And then the concept here is I'll read a little bit of it. The doll was the manifestation of the little boy's unconscious rage, his id. The original doll would have red liquid inside acting as blood. If you played too rough with the doll, it would bleed. Andy mixes his blood with the doll's blood, which brings the doll to life. The doll acts out against the boy's enemies. Ultimately, the mother was the target. So a very different kind of concept as to what we would get here. Very unsettling. I don't know. Like, I'm glad for the changes that they did make because this kind of went through a couple of different passes originally to kind of get to the concept that we're used to. So John Lafayette, who helped write that initial Child's Play and then directed obviously Child's Play 2, kind of got his 2 cents in when he got the screenplay. And so what he did was coin the name Chucky during his pass of the script. His idea was more of a Frankenstein type of moment at a toy factory. A prisoner was being electrocuted on death row, and his spirit got into the doll. And then they would cross cut between the execution and the doll being made at the factory. So he kind of coined in some very interesting concepts in terms of the serial killer version, the doll being called Chucky. So it was very kind of this kind of melding of ideas. And then Tom Holland came in and did a pass where he added the voodoo aspect of the whole Chucky concept. So all of which Don Mancini and John Lafayette were not fans of. But they said it works, so they kept it, even in those
Mhm.
future films.
Yeah, no, I think that's pretty interesting. Like that's very it's interesting. It's a harder sell, I would say, the Bloody Buddy aspect to it. I think that's a little convoluted, but I mean, it's always fun to go back and hear kind of how people's minds were running before you get that definitive version, because like we always see the product before we initially, most of the time we see the product before we hear the story behind it. And it's always crazy to think that, you know, this was never in the cards to begin with, because it does fit and it works well. But again, it's like hindsight is 2020. So it's like if we had known of this concept beforehand, where our thoughts would be. But yeah, I just think like the Bloody Buddy thing, and just kind of the angle of making Andy less sympathetic, was definitely not the way to go with it. I'm glad they changed that, because it does add that dynamic, I think, of well, I mean, it takes away that dynamic of, you know, Andy being an innocent soul, who is potentially being corrupted by this serial killer.
Yeah, because you need that character to be likable in order for you to, I think, be invested in any sense of the story. Excuse me. So you know, in like the original concept of Bloody Buddy, I feel like if that's the concept we go with, we wouldn't be talking about Child's Play anymore. We'd be probably talking about a random film that came out in 1988 called Bloody Buddy that no one knows about. You know, because I think that kind of version is a little too, I guess I would say, unique. You know, I don't think that's going to appeal to a general audience, because I think that fear, like I said, where I put like Pennywise and Chucky into a certain compartment of horror. I feel like, you know, everyone fears that a doll is going to come to life, even previously before Child's Play, just because that was kind of that narrative was already out there, so it wasn't anything new. But I think that the idea of Bloody Buddy would have just been, it wouldn't have resonated with many people. So it would have kind of been like one of those films that falls to the wayside. And for me personally, I mean, looking at this in 2022, I've always been a huge fan of, you know, I've always accepted the voodoo aspect of this. So for me, it works so well that I can't imagine these films without it, because it's such a good device to use to get you to that whole child or Charles Lee Ray into the doll, and then kind of the stakes, setting those stakes for Andy, you know, trying to steal his soul eventually. So I think that all works. I could not imagine it without that voodoo aspect. You know, it kind of surprised me that Don Mancini and John Lafayette were not fans of the voodoo aspect, just because it works so well.
Yeah, and I mean, it's again they could have been protective of their original ideas. You know, when someone comes in and kind of, you have three creative minds there, all with kind of
Yep.
different takes on it. You know, everybody's going to kind of think that their take is the best. I mean, we've had it with our own writing, where it's like I'll have an idea on something, you'll come in and, you know, pitch a different take on it, and you know, we'll kind of go back and forth for a while before we kind of land on where we think is best. So it's like, you know, it happens. It's when you get creatives in a room like that, and you have a script that everybody is so, you know, protective of, or so that they believe in, it is natural for stuff like that to go down. So it's just like, it's one of those things where it's like, I think that where they landed is great. They obviously landed in the best possible spot, because I mean, we've gotten so many Chucky movies, but you know, it's one of those things where it's like, I get where the lines of division could be drawn.
Yeah.
But alrighty, so I'm gonna walk us into our next section here that we so lovingly call "You Are All My Children."
You are all my children now.
Yes, so that brings us to this next segment that we call "You Are All My Children," where we go over the cast and crew of the film here, just kind of highlighting a few members that you know, really stood out to us. We think did an exceptional job, as most people do on these films. We tend to be speaking very highlighting on here, but this is where we kind of can go over everybody individually. And somebody that I don't think we've talked at all really about yet, and is kind of the biggest deal, would be Brad Dourif as the voice of
Yes.
Chucky. I mean, it's instant classic. I mean, like other than the remake, he's been the voice of Chucky throughout every piece of Chucky media that there is.
And to be honest, I mean, like with him, there's no other route to go. I mean, like I think we've both seen that 2019 film, and to say uh, Brad Dourif was sorely missed, I think would be an understatement. He just is that definitive voice. He can do it like no other. I mean, he brings so much personality to that Chucky character that it's so iconic in the sense where you don't even have to see anything. Just hearing his voice cursing or berating somebody, all his one-liners. I mean, he's as iconic as Robert Englund is to Freddy Krueger.
No, I agree with you. I mean, like he is the Chucky character through and through. And I love my boy Mark Hamill. I think he did what he could with that, but at the end of the day, he doesn't hold a candle to the Brad Dourif when it comes to this. I mean, he's been there from day one, and this is his character really at the end of the day. And it's so interesting because it's like it is a different kind of performance because like we've had multiple Jasons. You get to like Kane Hodder, where he plays him multiple times, so he's kind of the definitive Jason, if you will. A lot of people see him as the one, but at the end of the day, in all those films, you can put anybody behind that mask. Michael Myers, same thing. Nick Castle is kind of the one who everybody's like, that's the original shape. That's the one we go with. But every other movie is a different Michael Myers. But Brad Dourif is kind of in that league with like Robert Englund, where it's like, like you just don't have anybody else. We had Jackie Earle Haley give a solid attempt, I would say, but the movie wasn't very good. And, at the end of the day, he was missed there too. So it's like, that's the beauty of it, is you may not see him on screen, but the presence that he brings, the way that he voices and portrays Chucky, he owns it. It's his role. It is his, I think, when, he does sadly pass away at some point down the road, this may be probably going to be his most definitive role to date.
And just to look at it to be like, Robert Englund does a great job as Freddy Krueger, but he's very much in that role, living that. He's in those scenes doing it. Where Brad Dourif is voice acting in a sense, and it's just such a different dynamic to kind of get the emotion correct. So it's like it's a whole different level of acting to try and kind of resonate with your audience, I guess. So it's like that's such a testament to him and understanding that character. Because I mean, he's done other stuff that's just not voice. He's just so well known as that Chucky voice. So I mean, he can do other great acting. I mean, it's great to see him pop up in anything, but he's just so notable for that Chucky voice, and to do it from that original film all the way up to even today. I mean, the dude is just untouchable. It's like you can hear that laugh that he does. I mean, so iconic, so different. Again, this is another character that has so much personality. But yeah, you are in a bind eventually when, I mean, like he gets way more longevity than a Robert Englund because he's not physically doing anything. But eventually, you're not going to have him around anymore, and that kind of is where the character will suffer, just because he adds so much personality. He's so detrimental to the role of Chucky.
No, I agree. And we have Alex Vincent as Andy as well, who reprised his role from the first film. Is he in the third by chance?
No, the Andy character is, but it's not played by Alex Vincent because they do a time jump. And again, it's a problem because I think the film came out, this was like kind of like Saw, where they were just pumping them out regularly when they became hits, So after the success of the second one, they rushed into the third one, and I think they do a time jump where Andy's in military school. So he's considerably older than he was when we had seen him in Child's Play 2. So they could not use Alex Vincent for that, and that clearly suffers. I would have easily went with a different storyline, so that you could use Alex Vincent because he is that Andy Barclay character. I mean, there's no, again, he's as important as Brad Dourif in a sense, where you need him. And
He's the
he's
Laurie to Brad Dourif's Chucky, or to Brad Dourif's
100%.
Michael. Mhm.
And it's like he is that likable character, you know. So it's like you love him, you want the best for him, and nothing ever works out. So it's like the Andy and Chucky is just a marriage made in heaven or hell, depending on how you look at it.
However you want to take that. I love that. I got to give some props to my girl, Jenny A. Gutter.
Yes.
She was, of course, in American Werewolf in London. So, you know, it's like seeing her pop up was definitely a treat for me. I enjoy seeing her in whatever she ends up coming up in. She's always playing kind of like a secondary role. I can't think of anything that I've seen her kind of lead, but it is always nice to see her pop up. And I think she does a great job. She definitely
Oh yeah.
adds that sympathy. And then having to kind of change after the death of Phil to taking that sympathy away. I think really the only misstep with this movie for me is her death and how it's off screen.
Yeah.
It's
Um,
choreographed in a way where it's like, you know, it's supposed to be shocking, but by the time Kyle gets in that room and you see her there, you already know what's going on.
and I think they wanted to be pretty reminiscent. I think of Psycho. I think he's is what John Lafayette said in on his commentary. But this was one of those scenarios where I know there was a lot of tension on set because John Lafayette knew that Chucky was the star of this film, and that's how he went into filming it. So he spent a lot of time on different Chucky shots, and that would put them behind production wise, which would mean that some of the actual actors would lose kind of character development scenes because they spend so much time on Chucky. So I know her and Phil Simpson, Garrett Graham, both had issues with that, so they did not have a great time on set because they were losing their actual scenes, character scenes to Chucky.
Okay. So yeah, I mean, I guess you can kind of see a little bit of tension there, but I mean,
I mean,
at the
he's
end of the
very much
day,
the selling point of the film,
yeah,
but
it's like you kind of have to get when you know it's a movie about a killer doll. The killer doll should pretty much take precedent over
yeah,
anything. You know what I mean?
you're showcasing him.
Yeah, it's kind of like any camper getting upset that Jason Voorhees is getting more screen
Yes,
time than you. It's
you
kind
know
of
what
like,
the
well,
audience came to see.
it's like, yeah, I mean, we're here to see Jason, not you. So you know, it is what it is. But yeah, they definitely a standout there. You know, for me, Garrett Graham did an excellent job for what he had too. Um, I kept going back and forth on Phil with this because it's like, you know, and I think you're kind of supposed to, you know, where it's like he's, in my opinion, not the greatest guy. But he kind of sells an uneasiness about the situation. Like you can tell that he doesn't have full confidence in their ability to care for Andy. And in a way, you know, it can be looked at as selfish, but also in a way, it's kind of like you kind of understand it too at the same time, where at least he's being honest and he's being truthful about saying, you know, hey, I don't think we can do this. I don't think we can really handle what's been going on with this kid. Are we doing right by him? Is kind of the angle he tries to take with it. But yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, um, they do try to sell him in that light of being almost the pseudo secondary bad guy in a sense because they want him to be the stern hard ass of the household. And you know, when he does finally get his comeuppance and he realizes that Andy's been telling the truth, it is equal parts frustrating but satisfying, because at least you know that in his final moments he could have said, you know, shit, Andy was right. I should have probably listened to that kid.
Yeah, and I love the dynamic he does pull off because, you know, we kind of dislike Phil throughout this, you know, because he's always so undecided on Andy, and of course we want Andy to stick, you know, in the foster home, but he's always kind of that little voice opposed to Joanna saying, you know, I don't think we're really equipped to be taking care of him. So He very much is that kind of, I guess you would say, lifelike villain because no one believes it. Chucky is an actual force in any sense, so he's kind of the opposing force against Andy to a certain extent, and I think he plays that so well. He comes off as unlikable at times, pretty stern. So you kind of believe that he does not want Andy there, kind of snarky a little bit. But I think everyone plays their roles so perfect. You like Joanna in there because she likes Andy. She really sells that motherly figure. Garrett Graham sells the stern hard ass of foster father Kyle. Again, Christina Elise playing her role to perfection, being that kind of friend to Andy, especially later on in on the film, and kind of being his protector. Again, I think that dynamic, that Alex Vincent dynamic with Christina Elise, they just have so much chemistry on screen.
No, I agree. Is there anybody else that you'd like to highlight in this section there, sir?
I mean, John Lafayette, we can talk about for a minute. I think he had a clear vision here. You listen to the commentary that he did. He had a very specific version of the story that he wanted to tell. Unfortunately, he's no longer with us. But I think he will be remembered as making one of the most iconic installments of a horror franchise, because Child's Play 2, for me right now, is standing the test of time.
No, I agree. And I think like he did an excellent job. You can really see the care and detail that was put into this film. We talked about it a lot in the opening segment there of just like, everything from the color choice to the lens choice. And it's nice to see that him, even as a creative involved on the first film as a writer, kind of getting into step into his his spotlight of like, okay, now I'm going to direct this next one. It's great to see that evolution. You always want to see creatives getting their chance to do a little bit more, and I was really happy to see that. And something that I did not know before we started recording, so it is always good to hear kind of a good evolution to a creative.
Wonderful stuff.
Oh yeah. But I guess that takes us into our next segment called Creatures Features.
You gotta be fucking kidding.
So this would be our special effects segment. Yes, this is where we like to highlight all the ghouls, goblins, monsters, and how they were all created. And with a film relying so heavily on practical effects for its main character, this is a perfect case study for this segment, I would say. Now, the thing that I would like to start off by saying is just the evolution in tech that they brought into bringing Chucky to life from this one to the first one is astonishing, and the way they were able to kind of work that into the script, whereas Charles Lee Ray is becoming more of the doll, or the doll is becoming more of Charles Lee Ray the longer he stays in the body. And so the fact that they were able to kind of use that to their advantage with the growth of technology and the growth of the effect, I find it really cool how he is more doll-like in the first one, but as you kind of continue on into this one, he does look more human. He does act more. He's got more facial reaction, more, just like, I guess the biggest thing is just his ability to emote is much stronger, I feel like, in this. And I think, like, of course, that goes hand in hand with them, now understanding how this character works and how they're able to bring him to life. And now that's like, now we've got the blueprint. How can we expand upon this?
Yeah. And you can tell that going into this one, I think it was written to be like, what else can we do here? Because that first Child's Play film, I mean, no one knew what that was going to be. So it's kind of like we're just trying to get by, conceal Chucky because we don't know really how to pull off certain practical effects here. Um, Less is more in that sense. Where I think the sequel here, they really wanted to open him up, and we'd see those full length shots of Chuck, coming out of the closet, stuff like that, of him actually moving. It's a very different feel to a Child's Play film. I think they really take advantage of being able to open it up, show him a lot more kind of dead center. We're not gonna cut away really quick and just kind of have a little piece of his legs or his arm in the shot. They really wanted to show everything here, and I know that first film relied a lot on using a little person in certain instances because they did not have that full on technology, whereas John Lafayette was very adamant about not using a little person in any sort of suit. Here he wanted to go full puppetry, and that's what they did for this entire film.
Yeah, and I think it really shines most in again the ending sequence, like you said, where he's dragging himself along on the cart is a great way of expressing it. The Miss Kettlewell kill, I mean, just him coming up with a ruler, all looks fantastic. And I mean, just really any time that you see Chucky kind of just, in any action that he's engaging, even the killing of Phil, it's more impressive. It's just, it really, you can tell that they hit the ground running from frame one with those Chucky effects, and they understood the game. They knew how it was played. Now they just had to play it well, and I think they succeeded. I really think that they did an excellent job with making us believe that this doll is alive, and it's impressive, really. For when did we say this one came out? This was what,
90.
this was
This one came out in
1990.
1990.
Yeah, this was
Yep.
1990. So I mean, like, for those effects, it's really impressive to see how they did that and how they went about it. And again, it looks leaps and bounds more convincing than what they did in 2019.
Yeah.
And I think that that's something that I can see just from looking on IMDb here, that as the budget goes down on some of these later Chucky installments, especially these more recent ones, I think that might take a little bit more of a hit. Because for me, I think this would be the definitive Chucky look. I know he's
Yeah.
kind of changed up his presentation a little bit as he's gone along, but like I just really I think he looks fantastic here. Like, even just the little inflections of his nose and his lips and how they move and flutter more realistically. It's just so believable, and it is really mad props to the effects department here.
Yeah, and you can tell in the original, I believe that they did the voiceover work with Brad Dourif after they had filmed. In this one, Brad Dourif had actually went in and recorded all his lines previously so that they could match up all the movements while they were in production. So they really wanted to kind of make that as believable as possible, and it really does show in the facials that Chucky does. I mean, like, even in the uh he uses it like when Phil is hanging. Just the the expression on his face is terrifying. And to kind of relay that from a doll's point of view is tremendous because it is legitimately terrifying. It's otherworldly in a sense. So I think that kind of amplifies the terror here, and just to be able to kind of pull that off is a detriment. It is just big props to Kevin Yeager. He returned from the first one to the second one, so it's like that team. I think John Lafayette said that he referred to them basically as one big. He referred to them as Chucky, because it took so many people to make him move. That when he would talk to them, he would just recognize them as one big unit. So it's just like without them, there would be no movie. Because in going full practical here, I mean, again, watching this today, it's transported perfectly in 2022. You know, it doesn't none of the effects take me out of this film at all.
No, I agree. I think it does stand the test of time as far as just the way that he expresses himself, the way that he moves and everything. It feels naturalistic. And to some of you guys, it might be like, oh, well, you can see kind of the stiffness in him a little bit, but I think it plays well because at the end of the day, he's still a toy. You know, he doesn't have a full range of motion like we do. You know what I mean? Like he's only going to be able to deal with what he has. So it's just kind of
He
like,
has articulation. So
yes, he is. What did you say? 5 points of
yeah.
articulation. So it's just one of those things where it's like that's all he's working with. So it's kind of like, to me, they did a fantastic job with that, and you know, it's awesome to see the evolution of it. And you know, I haven't seen, like I said, Child's Play 3. Do the effects hold up there as far as Chucky? I know you said the movie isn't fantastic,
I
but
only
would you
watched
say that
about
the
I only watched a little bit of Child's Play 3 in preparation for this, so I haven't seen it in its entirety in quite some time. I think that they hold up pretty well. I can't think of any scenes that really stand out to me like how they do in Child's Play 2 in terms of uh, taking advantage of the full use of the Chucky doll. So I can't 100% say that they do, but I think that they're pretty well. I think it's a returning team, but I don't know 100%.
Awesome. Alrighty. Well, I think that's pretty much everything we can say about special effects, unless you have any other notes here.
Nope, nothing. I think we pretty much covered pretty much everything. Yes, we're good to go.
Alrighty. So we'll take us into our final segment, which we entitle "The Check is in the Mail."
Just listen to the old Pork Chop Express and take his advice on a dark and stormy night, all right? When some wild-eyed 8-foot-tall maniac grabs your neck, taps the back of your favorite head up against a barroom wall, and he looks you crooked in the eye and he asks you if you've paid your dues, well, you just stare that big sucker right back in the eye and you remember what old Jack Burton always says at a time like that. Have you paid your dues, Jack? Yes, sir, the check is in the mail.
So this is our kind of our wrap-up segment here. This is where we kind of want to put a bow on things and just really come down from all the history, the effects, the backgrounds, the cast, and really just give our final thoughts and recommendation on the film that we discussed. So kind of with that said, Luke, I'll let you start this one off, but Child's Play 2 was your recommendation. This movie is near and dear to your heart. So tell me, with your kind of closing segment here, give us your little ending speech here for Child's Play 2.
Well, as I started this off, was this is my definitive Child's Play film. I think it really comes into its own here. It knows what it wanted to be. I think it looked at that first film as the blueprint of this is what we produced with what we could, and then they took that concept and they amplified it for Child's Play 2. And I think this one has so many different definitive scenes. It's so iconic. I mean, again, I think a lot of people go back to that factory scene in terms of when we're talking about Child's Play, just because so much happens there in terms of, you know, Chucky losing his hand, losing his legs, wheeling himself out in that with the wheels squeaking, and then even being covered in melted plastic. I think a lot of people remember that stuff before they remember a lot of the things that happened in the original Child's Play, just because Child's Play 2 was on television all the time from what I remember. So for this, standing the test of time, I think this one still goes down as the most iconic Child's Play film out there.
Yes, for me, again, like stating before, I have not really sunk my teeth too deep into this franchise. So Luke recommending this to me again, I was excited. I was interested to see really where I would come out on the end of this one. And I don't want to say that I was surprised, but I was definitely happy. to come out and have such positive things to say about it. I really enjoyed myself here. And again, I brought it up twice before already, but this really does have that quality of like a Halloween 2, kind of thing where they just bleed very nicely into each other. And I really appreciate when films can do that. It's great to see the same creative team kind of working together behind the scenes to make that happen, especially like we said, the promotion of a writer from the first coming in and being able to actually take hold and tell the story. It's great. Like for me, I was very, very happy with just the presentation, the execution of the story. Would I have made some changes of making this a Christmas story? Sure. I think that that's a great idea, but I mean, that's not the world we live in. So I have to judge what is given to me, and I give this high marks. I say, if you're like me and you haven't really, Chucky's not something that you've explored or gone into, definitely check this one out. Check this and the first one out for sure. And as the other sequels go on, jury's still out for me on those. I'm sure we'll get down to them at some point as we go along here, whether it's on a SplatterCast or another segment down the road. But yeah, I mean, for now, I can easily say that if I wasn't in the Chucky camp before, I am now. And I'm really, really happy that you picked this, Luke, and kind of got me to kind of cross the threshold there.
Yeah, I still think it's a lot of fun. I'm really glad you liked it. I was hoping you would. I had high hopes as soon as you said you were gonna watch it. So I'm really glad it worked out. I will say, 3, from what I remember, is not too much fun. I think Bride of Chucky is a lot of fun in its own way. So I definitely think that will be somewhere down the line on the agenda to speak about. I think this is a great follow up to the original, and again, it's different. It's like Jaws and Jaws 2, where they're fun in their own different ways. And for me, Child's Play 2, bread and butter right here. Absolutely love it. A lot of great kills, a lot of great lines. Chucky is the star without a doubt. And I feel like this one was kind of like the catalyst into creating the Chucky TV series. I think this is a lot of what people go back to in terms of what's the blueprint we want to work from. I think Child's Play 2 is that, just because it is so iconic. So you listen to this podcast, I'm hoping you've seen Child's Play 2 in its entirety, because it has unlimited rewatch value, I will say.
You son of a bitch. You had to make the Jaws 2 reference in there. And if anybody doesn't know, one of my latest additions to my background, something I've had for a minute, is my little Jaws 2 art piece back there. Yeah, that is one that will be showing up at some point. You guys can understand my affinity for that film. I'm a huge defender of Jaws 2.
I love it as well. So, spoiler.
Great. Heck yeah. So I guess that's going to about wrap us up for the discussion on Child's Play 2. Definitely high recommendation here from both of us. Yeah, I always appreciate seeing a movie that I haven't seen before on the show. That's one of my favorite things to do. Just because I think, like, we can talk about all the stuff that I love, and there's going to be plenty of time to do so. As we go along, like we can really run this thing as many episodes as we want. So, the fact that I got to see something nice, fresh, and I enjoyed it is always a plus. So, it's great, and a nice bounce back after the Spawn 2, or no, sorry, Spawn conversation, where that one was a little bit of a harder sell. You definitely didn't have to worry too hard on this one, because like I said, I was curious, and your recommendations, as usual, paid off in a big way, because I was definitely on board with this one.
Well, perfect. Now I got to pick something totally terrible for my next pick. So.
Well, we definitely have a schedule worked out, so there are going to be a handful of things. I get my pick on the 26th, so that'll be when our next episode comes out after this. To find out what that is, you're just going to have to wait and see. They are always a surprise. And then after that, we have October. So we're going to be in there. We're going to be doing a little special thing for you guys. So keep an eye out for that announcement. Should
Big
be coming
month.
up towards the end of the month here. We'll let you guys know kind of what's going on, what we're doing. We're still prepping content. We took Labor Day weekend here, and we both worked on some content for the channel. We were very happy with it. I think it turned out really well. So we're excited to release that for you guys here coming up in October. But we'll announce that both the scheduled Splattercasts are already pre-decided and scheduled. So this won't be like how it's been, where it's Luke picks one, I pick one kind of thing. We decided already for the month of October what we're talking about. So it'll be a minute before Luke gets another pick here that's solo him. So he'll have some time to maul some things around. So we'll see where your tastes lie once we kind of get into early November there.
We'll see. I already have
yeah.
a few on a list, so we'll see.
I
if
know you
those
do,
make
and
the cut.
I'm eager because you've already expressed some of that list to me, so I'm eager to see which ones you're gonna pick. But yeah, I mean, we gotta. That's gonna be a bit. So I think I'm curious to see if anything is gonna happen or anything's gonna pop up that's gonna divert from the list, because I too have things in mind, but the last couple I've kind of just been like, no, I'm doing this instead. You know what I mean? Like I have said things and then I've kind of switched gears. So I'm curious, but yeah, guys, if you want to keep up with us, you can always do so in the comment section below. Let us know what you guys think of Child's Play 2 or any of the topics that we discussed on this episode. You can also find us on Instagram and Twitter at SplatterCastPod. Look us up on there. Like I said, the Instagram's brand new to us, but we'll be keeping you up with content as we go along, and it seems to be a lot of fun. You can always find myself and Luke, though, on Twitter, keeping up the conversations, talking all our favorite horror movies, posting about things. And yeah, Luke's usually on there, keeping the conversation alive and flowing, always getting the nice little hearts and shout outs. So he's kind of our curator on there for sure.
I try.
And then, yeah, if you guys feel that we deserve it, feel like we did a good enough job here, please hit that subscribe button for us. You know, we've been really working hard here. The goal is to hit 100 by the end of October, especially with the ramp up of content that we're about to hit you guys with. But yeah, we've been doing really great on that front. People have still been subscribing and giving us their time, and we really, really appreciate it. It's also motivating. So again, if you like what we're doing here and you think we deserve it, hit that subscribe button. And yeah, so other than that, you can find us on Spotify, Apple Music, Stitcher, anywhere your podcasts are found. And yeah, I guess that about wraps it up. Luke, you got anything for the good people?
Just keep on the lookout. October is going to be such a busy month for us. A lot of stuff coming down the pipeline. So stay tuned. And we'll see. We're going to take you on our tour of terror as usual.
Absolutely. But until next time, I'm Dylan Newell.
And I'm Luke Janesco.
And remember, everybody, stay scared.